Welcome to Author Talk with Anna Mansager, and I'm here with Linda Legters.
Thanks for having me.
And she's going to talk about her book, Connected Underneath.
Oh, let me show you.
And I wanted to start with your book starts with a poem, which is very important to the book. Do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Should we read it first?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
Actually, there's something I want to say first. That we're doing this interview in the aftermath of Orlando, horrific events in Minnesota and Baton Rouge and Dallas, and these are divisive events, and the aftermath is divisive. And a major theme of the book is that we are connected underneath, and that we're all in this together. So it's a difficult day to come in and talk about a novel when the world is in trauma. But here we are. Let's read It sounds like I'm a teacher, so that sounds like a very teacherly thing to say. So it's Islands by Mariel Rukeyser. Oh, for God's sake, they are connected underneath. They look at each other across the glittering sea. Some keep a low profile. Some are cliffs, the bathers think. Islands are separate like them. I didn't do very well the last line. The bathers think islands are separate like them.
And so your book is kind of about all of these connections, both real and imaginary. And this poem is extremely important to your book.
In fact, I'd finished the book. I almost finished the book without knowing what the title would be. A Michael Cunningham interview, he once said he didn't know what his books were about until the last few pages. I knew what it was about, but I couldn't quite bring it together for a title that mattered. And then, by chance, I knew the poem, but it hadn't surfaced. And by chance, I ran across a recording of it. I thought, of course, it's connected underneath. I had to get permission to use it for the title.
Oh, you did.
Which put me in touch with the Rukeyser estate, which was great fun.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was interesting. It was very interesting, yeah.
Okay, so that's, kind of a good starting point. Titles are always so hard for people.
They are hard, yeah.
So I think that's great. Your characters, they all sort of seem to live in their heads a little bit. Would you say that kind of encompasses the sort of we're all connected, but, in the same vein, we're separate?
That's an interesting observation. I think the question is, to what degree do we all live inside our heads? I mean, most of the time, we're not talking.
Right.
Most of the time, even in a conversation, half of the time. So that's an interesting question. Certainly, Celeste, who is observing the world through her kitchen fan vent and from a wheelchair, has chosen to be confined in this way. She's safe there. Certainly, she spends most of her time in her imagination. Persephone, the lesbian teenage girl, feels some sense of isolation because of this, and because she doesn't have any real parents. Did you think Theo's living inside his head too?
Yeah, I felt, maybe not as much as, the teenage characters, but I do feel that teenagers do kind of pull themselves in for a couple of years before they can come out again. But I think I felt that your character, Theo, which is one of the main characters, it's still kind of in that teenage stage. He hasn't come out yet.
Oh, that's interesting. Sort of an interrupted development on his part. Oh, that's interesting. Well, he's certainly alone in his worry. For those who haven't read it, Persephone is his adopted daughter, and clearly she's running off the rails, and he's worrying about her rather, privately, and he has no one to turn to. That's interesting that you find him immature. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Well, I wouldn't say immature. But I would say just not completely developed yet.
That's interesting. I do not disagree. No one had quite put it that way, but I don't disagree.
So you're a mother.
Yes.
You have a son.
3
sons. And a lot of this book is about being a parent or not being a parent. Did you kind of draw on that a lot while you were writing this?
Well, hopefully I was a better parent than any of the mothers in the book. But I was aware while they were growing up, first of all, although they're all in their 20s, I think I was probably a good mom for one. I just don't know which one. And I think, and because I know some of the memories they have are a little bit cockeyed, I think that's not how that happened, or it's lopsided or something. And so I'm aware of how much power, accidental power, we have to make mistakes. And it could be we're making the right decision in the moment, but it's read wrong, or it's remembered wrong, or it's powerful. So being a parent is carries with it some danger. I think teachers have the same role, especially in elementary school.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The same role, so they carry so much power. The town that I've made up is Medina, which is of course a play on the word Madonna. Because, sorry, spoiler alert, all the moms in here are awful. Really bad. Hopefully. Only one of my kids has read it.
Uh-huh.
He didn't say that. He didn't say, whoa. So I'm thinking I'm not represented here.
Well, I guess more what I meant was Theo. A lot of Theo's character is a very deep worry about his daughter, which makes sense, but
parents worry. They worry constantly. So this is true. That's definitely a reflection.
So your book takes place in upstate New York, which I felt I actually spent a lot of time in Hudson Valley area, so I felt that was very, very well described. I think anybody who lives on the East Coast will be able to recognize that sort of town or neighborhood, and the sort of weird existential place you almost get to when you leave that area and like go to Grand Central on the train, or you go to the city.
That's great. I love you talking about my book. That's great. I'm so glad. No, that's great. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you're a writer and we live near New York. So do you go to the city a lot and sort of have these feelings while you're going there? Or was it just more...
I'm pretty familiar with New York State and those towns, but those towns exist in Connecticut too.
Yeah,
Derby, or the same sort of post-industrial. There's a brick handsomeness about them, even though they're, in some I don't mean anything against Derby, but there is a sense of decay because the industry has left. But I never lived in a town like that, so pretty much this town and what it's like to live there is a product of my imagination. The scenes with Persephone on the train actually mimics an experience going from the Westport into the city. I usually drive, but this was a particularly poignant trip where you're just zooming by and it's every station looks alike and it gets a little grimier and the graffiti appears, and then you pull into Grand Central and you emerge into this sort of cathedral. So that was definitely from that experience.
And it's interesting because this web series is local, for local authors, and so far everyone has some New York in some sort of prominent place in their book, which I think is it's interesting.
Absolutely.
Including myself, which is, we Connecticuters, I think we partly think we're also honorary New Yorkers.
I did live there for a lot of years. I'm aware that unless you're born there, it's like being on the Cape. Unless you were born there, you're an outsider.
Right. Yeah.
But there was certainly a pull for New York for all of us here. I mean, I think we do feel like we're honorary New Yorkers.
Yeah.
So much of our sustenance is from there. Yeah.
So the character of Celeste, I think, is very interesting because she doesn't actually pop up that much. I mean, she does definitely have a prominent place in the book.
You haven't finished it, right?
No.
Okay. She'll pop up a little more.
She comes up a little more.
She comes up a little more.
But I think it's very interesting that it kind of goes from, what's going on with Theo and his daughter to Celeste, who is kind of observing them through her window. But it goes from her first person to Theo and Persephone's third persons. So I find that very interesting. So would you say Celeste is the main character?
No, I think that Theo, Persephone, and Celeste have equal weight. And this took me 8 years. It's a very small book, but it took me 8 years. And part of the problem was that I couldn't figure out the point of view. And I went through third, and I went through limited omniscient, and I went through showing different scenes from each point of view, and none of those were satisfying. And so I finally, there's a word for a narrator called flaneur, where there's someone just walking through and noticing everything, even if they're not a real player. So I decided to do some kind of a variation on that and have Celeste, the sort of voyeur, but also a principal character. And the entire book is from her point of view. How she's, it switches to third because she's talking about what's happening to Persephone or her neighbors or whatever, but it's still her point of view. So
she's sort of the one deciding how
to present.
How these things have gone down.
That's right. And as the book goes on, she becomes more and more accurate because she's connecting more with the people who are telling her real things as opposed to what she's made up and gotten wrong.
Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty interesting too, because we as writers, we definitely observe other people and, kind of come up with these stories in our heads. Like, what is this person doing in this black SUV?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, that's so true. I did a podcast that was released yesterday with a group called Writing on the Edge, and they asked me, it's an LGBT website, podcast, and they asked me how, not being a member of the community, not being in a wheelchair, not hanging out with bikers, I could do any of this. And I said, my imagination. They said, did you do research, especially into the LGBT community? I said, no, because I teach at Norwalk Community, so I see lots of the diversity there, and I didn't want to research. I wanted to be Persephone in her isolation. She wouldn't be researching what that was like. And they said, the guys there said, but you observe. Oh, very true. So I suppose every minute of a writer's life is research.
It is.
Because we're always, absolutely, you hear a conversation and you finish it for them in your head. That's so true.
I do that. You see people in cars and you're like, where are they going? Yeah. Well, I'll just decide where they're going.
That's right, or where they've been.
Yeah.
And what are they angry about?
So that is actually something I wanted to bring up, Persephone's sexuality, which I think is interesting because although there is definitely an upswing in the LGBT literature now, it's still not huge to have a main character who is gay, and that the entire book is not about their gayness,
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Was this something that kind of happened organically, as in you always knew?
She, and only writers understand this, she didn't tell me for a long time that she was gay. It emerged one day as I was writing a scene. I thought, oh, of course, this is who she is. And you're right. And again, this came up in the podcast too, that this was published by an LGBT press called Lethe Press. And Steve Berman there is one of the few who's still concentrating on gay lit. Most of the others have found they are not needed because gay lit is being picked up by other imprints. However, as you just said, a gay book tends to be nothing but a gay book. It's not part. They're not being seen as part of the fabric, and certainly they are part of the fabric of our lives. And so it wasn't. I didn't say, "Oh, gee, I want Lethe Press to pick up my book." It was just part of life, part of the life in this community.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. One more thing I'd like to bring up before we wrap up here. There was a passage that I felt was very interesting in your book where Persephone is in Grand Central and she's looking at the dome with the constellation design up there and thinking about how the ancient Greeks used to think that's what the sky was.
I'm really enjoying this.
I like the connection to the title because the title is connected underneath,
right?
But the dome is on top. So in a way, it kind of like encompassses everything.
And what a nice job the designer of this cover did, don't you think? With the stars.
Yeah, let's hold it up. There's a moon and that
stars
water.
And water.
Stars
and
water. So it kind of just encompasses everything.
And well, as you'll find out, Celeste realizes that in a way she and Persephone are alike, in that Celeste has always been worried that she'll be sucked down into quicksand, and Persephone's always been afraid that she'd fly off into the universe. But that similarity of not feeling like they're on solid ground. And so because of this fear that Persephone has, for her to go into Grand Central alone for the first time and to see this constellation seemed like something she would notice.
Mm-hmm.
And her father, Theo's father, was a classics professor at Yale, so he has a smattering of mythical background that sort of comes into his thinking.
Right, and that's also interesting too, because again, I kind of skimmed the book, so I don't know how aware of Persephone's.
You will finish it, right?
But Persephone's idea of Theo's past, I suppose. But in a way, Theo's father kind of flew a little too high as well.
That's right.
So
yeah.
That there's also the theme of that, of kind of the push and pull of like, how far do you go?
That's right.
So yes, this, as much as I've read, it's
you're actually on the right track.
It's a very interesting read. It's very internal. It kind of pulls you into yourself.
Well, spread the word.
Yes. Okay. So again, I'm with Linda Legters, and her book is Connected Underneath, which you can find on the Kindle store.
Right, or Amazon, or Barnes & Noble, or your independent bookstore.
And you can also find her at lindalegters.com. You can follow me at Lioness Goddess on Twitter, which everything I will put in the description at the end of this. So we're with Linda Legters again, and thank you for watching Author Talk.
Thanks for having me.